Hey, it's Vembo. I'm back playing on a new world in Minecraft once again, just taking it slow and exploring a bit. Anyway, sit back, relax, and let this play in the background while I share some Reddit stories that will help you unwind after a long day. Feel free to drift off if you need to, and please consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. Am I the bad person for not wanting to switch seats with a kid on a plane, even though I had the window seat? 28 was on a 5-hour flight last week for a work trip, and since I get a bit jittery on planes, I paid extra for a window seat because it genuinely helps calm me down. I like having something to focus on during takeoff and landing, and just seeing the clouds pass by makes the whole experience less tense. I boarded early, found my seat, and was getting settled when a woman walked up with her young son, probably around 8 or 9 years old, and asked if I would be willing to trade seats with him so he could have the window. I asked where their seats were, and she said she was in a middle seat 5 rows back. I felt bad, but I told her as politely as I could that I'd rather keep my seat since I specifically paid for it, and flying makes me uneasy. She didn't argue, just kind of nodded and said, "Okay, no problem," and walked back with her kid, but I could already tell from her tone that she wasn't thrilled. I tried to brush it off, thinking that was the end of it, but about half an hour into the flight, I noticed her whispering to someone across the aisle from her and glancing toward me. A few minutes later, I saw a different passenger looking over at me with this weird kind of judgmental face, like I'd just told a puppy it couldn't have a treat or something. I put my headphones on and tried to ignore it. But then when I got up to use the bathroom, a man who I assume was her husband muttered, "Must be nice to sit in a kid's seat," under his breath, just loud enough that I could hear it. I didn't respond, mostly because I didn't want to cause a scene mid-flight, but it sat with me for the rest of the trip, like I didn't want to be the bad guy in this. I wasn't trying to be mean, and I'm not anti-kid or anything. I just don't think it's fair to expect someone to give up their seat, especially one they paid extra for, just because a kid wants it. It's not like I refused to give up a seat for someone who was sick or had a broken leg or something. And it's not like she even offered an equal trade. She wanted to swap my window for a middle seat in a totally different row. That didn't sit right with me, and honestly, it still doesn't. But at the same time, the way that family reacted made me feel like I'd broken some kind of unspoken rule. Like I was supposed to immediately sacrifice my comfort because a child wanted something, and if I didn't, then I was just some cold, selfish guy with no heart, which isn't how I see myself at all. I've given up seats before for elderly passengers or for families that got separated and clearly wanted to sit together, but this just didn't feel like one of those situations. It felt more like they assumed I'd cave in the moment the request was made, and when I didn't, they decided to act like I was the villain of the flight, and I could kind of tell they were trying to get others on their side, like they wanted the public pressure to shame me into switching after the fact, which made the whole thing feel even weirder and kind of manipulative. Maybe I overthought the whole thing. Maybe I should have just moved and avoided the awkwardness. But then again, where does that line stop? Do I give up something I paid for every time someone else wants it more? Do I let a stranger borrow my phone if they say their kid wants to play a game on it? I know that's a stretch, but still. The entitlement just threw me off. And then the passive-aggressive behaviour from the husband really sealed it. Like, if you're going to ask someone for a favour and they politely say no, maybe just accept that instead of turning it into this silent group guilt parade for the rest of the flight. But even after all that, I kept replaying it in my head. Was I too cold? Should I have just said yes and taken the loss for the sake of a kid's smile? Was keeping my seat really worth becoming the silent antagonist of row 14 for 5 hours? And now that it's been a few days, I still catch myself wondering if I accidentally turned into the kind of person I usually roll my eyes at, the stubborn traveller who thinks their seat is more important than anyone else's needs, even when those needs are coming from a kid who just wanted to look out the window at the clouds or see the city as we landed. Maybe the mum didn't plan ahead, or maybe it was a last-minute booking and she had no choice in their seat assignments. I'll never know, but maybe that should have made me more flexible. Still, It just didn't feel like my responsibility to fix that, and I wonder if people would have reacted the same way if the situation had been reversed. Like if I had asked someone to switch out of a window seat they paid for so that I could feel less anxious during the flight, would that have been seen as a reasonable request, or would I have been told to deal with it, since that's part of flying? Okay, here is my take on this. From what I am seeing, you are not the bad person. You paid extra for a specific seat that helps you manage anxiety, and politely declining a downgrade to a worse seat, especially one in a different row, is completely reasonable. You didn't raise your voice, you didn't shame the child, and you didn't inconvenience anyone. You simply chose to keep something you intentionally reserved and paid for. I could be wrong, but that's just me. Anyway, here's the next story. Bartenders, what is the most memorable interaction you had with a customer? He wasn't completely hammered, but I'll share my favourite interaction I've had with a bar guest that honestly was a huge eye-opener to how to live my own life. The restaurant bar I work at is an odd concept. We have a lot of different things going on throughout the week, so some nights it goes from a nice place to grab food and drinks for dinner to straight-up dance club, high-volume bar. I love it because it's just a glorious, well-executed and managed chaos. So working there always keeps me on my toes anyways. Getting off topic, we do trivia on Sunday and Monday nights, and our table taps big tubes of beer that sit on the table, or bar, so everyone can pour their own beer, are half-priced all night. So we were a fairly new establishment, and we were still getting a lot of new people in to see what all he fuss was about. This guy comes in and he's probably late 40s, normal-looking guy. My first thought was he looks like a friend of mine's dad. I'm fairly observant and noticed his hands look like those belonging to someone who is in construction or some sort of manual labour type profession. Nothing wrong with physical labour. I've done the work myself. I just sort of scan people, naturally and harmlessly, in my head, put them into a certain stereotype, and then try to see if it holds up. I love it when the negative stereotypes don't hold up. I've been trying to work on not being so judgy, which I could have been like, this guy's probably going to be a typical sort of construction guy, whatever. I told him about the special and that it actually comes out cheaper to buy the beer tower at half price there and drink 3 of the large beers. He wasn't overly grumpy or snarky, just very short with his answers. Just seemed like he didn't want to talk much. If you want to listen, I'll talk, that's for sure. So I talked him into the tower. He watched whatever sports games were on the TVs, drank some beer and ate some food. Eventually, he loosens up and gets to talking about how he just moved back in the area in the last few months after living in New Orleans for 25 years. As we're talking about New Orleans, a classic rock song might have been Led Zeppelin. They're one of my favourites. So we'll say Ramble On came on. And I said, ooh, this is a great song. So we start talking about music. And he mentions he lived right outside of some fairgrounds in New Orleans. And he, his wife and daughter would walk down the street to concerts that would come through Widespread Panic. Was one band he mentioned that stood out and sort of bonded us because I had just seen them at Hangout Fest in Gulf Shores not long before this night, and we both like some of the same bands. Throughout our conversation, he would sort of randomly mention, well, yeah, my daughter's normally with me during this time, but she's in college now and down in Florida on spring break, which I mistook for a dad missing his daughter, who is now growing up, and the beer sort of bringing that emotional side out. Finishing our music conversation, he pays out. After he's been at the bar for about 3 hours, our conversation was sort of off and on. As I went back and forth to other guests, he gets up and asks which way to the restroom. As he comes back from the other room, and by my bar, I'll never forget it, as long as I live. I'm not just saying that, but the events of our seemingly normal encounter got burned in my brain. He stops and sort of leans up to the bar and looks me in the eye and says, hey man, I'm sorry. If I was a jerk when I came in earlier, and I told him he didn't come across that way. Guess he realised how short and sort of unapproachable he was being at first, and the beers brought out that apology, and he said, well, thank you for still talking to me. It's been a rough day because this is the first year my daughter hasn't been with me today, and it's the 4-year anniversary of my wife of 30 years passing away. So thank you for not just dismissing me." He reached his hand out to shake mine and told me to have a good night and walked out the door. I'm a fairly emotional guy, not in a dramatic way or anything, just very empathetic, and I have recently lost my grandmother with whom I was very close, so I got teary-eyed, had someone watch my bar and go outside to smoke a cigarette and settle down. And it's still an encounter I think of almost every day. Those minutes after that, just thinking by myself, were so profound. This one hit me right in the feels. Sometimes the most profound human connections happen in the most unexpected places. That man carried his grief with such quiet dignity and found a moment of peace with a stranger who just listened. Sometimes that's all we need, is someone who doesn't dismiss us. Why did you and your first significant other break up? Around 14, me and a few of the guys I went to school with started hanging around with these girls from another school on the other side of the city. We hung out a lot, all friends. Then the other guys started dating some of the girls, and in an effort to not make me feel left out. I wasn't interested in dating at the time. I was quite happy playing football and chilling out, so they brought their other friend. We'll call her Maria anyway. Maria and I are talking. We have very little in common. I like sports and music. She likes to do very little, and read, I should point out here. Maria was absolutely stunning at the time. A solid 10, whereas I sat somewhere around a 5, pushing a 6, all good. This goes on for a few weeks. I like her. She's funny, gorgeous, and I was quite happy, basically sitting looking at her. This all takes place during summer holidays. Anyway, school comes around me, and one of my best friends are sat in our electronics class. We picked it for our GCSEs, and we were starting our projects that week. And he says, "I bet you £20 and a packet of whatever it is you're smoking that you can't make you and Maria official." I took it as a joke and said, "Yeah, whatever man, you're on." So for the next few weeks we were getting on. Well, we started meeting up earlier than the others and hanging out on our own. By this point she'd found out that I liked her, but guys being guys, my friends never mentioned. If it was mutual, we hit each other's phone numbers as well and would text all the time. This was back in 2004. We didn't have WhatsApp or iMessage. We had 10 pence and XTs and a pay-as-you-go phone anyway. Fast forward about 3 more weeks. We've sort of fallen into being a couple. We've not told anyone, as we're kind of just confused about it as well. She asks if I think we're a couple. I said, "It's up to you. I'm happy either way." She says, "Yeah, let's make it official." So back in those days, you had MSN Messenger and MySpace. So to make it official, it was a top friend on MySpace and a name drop in your MSN name. That happened. The friend that made the bet with me instantly messages me, saying stuff you've told her, and she's going along with it. I asked what he was about. He says the bet we made. I said I thought it was a joke, and he said we were just going to see what happened anyway. The next time I see him, he pays up, even though I said I thought he was joking a year or SC. Oh, later, me and my mates are stressed as hell. GCSEs are getting us down. We're starting to worry about college, etc. So electronics class happens again. I'm nearly done with my project, a laser-tripped home security system made for under £20. He's finishing up his road safety thing and knocked my project off the table while I was picking some more parts out of my tray of components. I'd ordered, I get back to the desk and my stuff's in pieces on the floor. I go mental. It took me about 6 months to design, order parts and build to a point where it would work. I punched him for it. He knew how hard I'd worked on it, after I gave him what I thought was a well-deserved beating. He says he's going to tell Maria about the bet he proceeds to do. So the next time I saw her, she gave me a slap, says, "So this year was nothing but a bet between you and your mates. You're a jerk. His girlfriend splits up with him because he split me and Maria up. And she thought I was a nice guy, and he'd messed my electronics course up entirely." A few months later, me and Maria bump into each other, out and about. I'm off to band practice. She's going to the library next to the practice rooms. After we've done our respective activities for the day, we met for a milkshake, had a chat, and tried again. 5 months later, we split again. For unrelated reasons, I just wasn't into it anymore. Fun times. The classic tale of a bet gone wrong, and a friend who couldn't keep his mouth shut. Nothing quite destroys young love, like finding out it started as a £20 wager between mates at least. He got his money and learned that some friends aren't worth keeping around. What was the worst reason someone gave for breaking up with you? About 6 years ago, I lived in an extremely tiny town. Nobody locked their doors or cars or anything of that sort. Everyone knew each other, and it was a very tight-knit community. For reference, I am 25 years old, 6 feet 4 inches, 260 pounds, around 10% body fat. I have an IFBB pro card in bodybuilding. This will come into play later in the story, so my wife and my dog are sleeping in our bedroom, which is on the opposite side of our apartment, with the door closed so the dog doesn't rummage through the garbage at night while we sleep. It's raining outside, and usually the apartment creaks and makes noises because it's very old, but I know the sounds and go back to sleep, as it happens every night. Now this night in particular, I was hearing some extra noises. My dog W, who usually ignores the sounds as well, was going absolutely bonkers in the room. He's not a barker, but he lets me know when he hears something by jumping on the bed and licking my face. Also when he's scared. So to get back to the story, my dog is going nuts. My wife is sound asleep, and I'm up watching Netflix at around 3 a.m. when I have work at 8 a.m. I keep hearing these faint noises like a cabinet opening and closing. But like I said before, we are in a very small community, and I think nothing of it. No way, someone is actually in my apartment. So all of a sudden I take one earphone out and I hear the flicker of a light switch. It's an old house, so it has those loud light switches that flicker when you turn something on and off. I immediately knew something was wrong, as this is not a sound I know. Romali here, and I get up and crack my door open just a little and see a light on in the near kitchen room. I know I shut all the lights before showering before bed, so I leap into action. Wake up my wife and tell her to stay here with the dog and lock the door, and to not come out unless I say everything is safe. I walk into the kitchen and there is a guy, probably late 30s, going through every drawer and cabinet. I said hey in a loud voice and scared the absolute hell out of the guy. I guess he thought no one was home and he charged at me. So for reference, remember, I said 6'4", 260, and this guy charging at me around 5 feet 10 inches, 160. So he charges at me and I shove him against my wall with my forearm against his neck, make a huge hole in the wall and begin to head tee the guy until he's nearly unconscious. I turned him around and proceeded to hold him in a chokehold, and out of nowhere, his wife. I later found out his wife was also in my apartment and came charging at me. I put up my foot exactly how you would imagine it in the WWE, and I kicked her right in her gut, and she fell to the floor. So now the guy is unconscious, the girl is on the floor in massive amounts of pain, and I'm standing there covered in blood from this guy's face. I feel funny, not sure what this feeling is. I feel cold in a spot on my stomach, sort of like if you spit on your stomach and a strong gust of wind comes, and it feels extra cold, you know what I mean. Well, I looked down and realised I got stabbed. I had a 4.5-inch knife in my abdominal muscle while I was headbutting. This guy, he was able to sneak a knife he had right into my gut without me realising it. I quickly start to panic and call 911. I sit there until they come, go to the hospital, nearly dying. I recovered well, missing all vital organs, and when I woke up in the hospital I had police there and was told that the guy robbing my apartment was dead. My headbutts broke his skull and he internally bled out in his brain. My heart sank. Yes, the guy stabbed me. Yes, the guy threatened my wife and dog, who was like my son. And yes, he came onto my property, but I did not want to end anyone. Well, anyway, to sum up the story, when I awoke in the hospital, and they told me this, my wife divorced me on the spot, saying she can't stay married to someone who ended someone else, regardless of the situation. Hold up, let me get this straight. This man defended his home, his wife and his dog against 2 burglars who broke in and stabbed him, and she divorced him for it. Imagine being that ungrateful to someone who literally almost died protecting you. Some people really don't deserve the heroes in their lives. What reason did you break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend that they will never know about? I watched him cheat on me, and he will never know we lived in the same city and had been dating for about 10 months. The last couple of months, his passive-aggressive manipulations had begun to come a bit more transparent, but I was young and convinced I could fix everything on a Friday. When we had plans, he called to say a friend at work had been fired, and he was going to go out with him to help cheer him up. It was fine, I said, and he hung up before I could finish my sentence, that I left some work papers at his place the night before and needed to grab them. I had keys, so I didn't think anything of swinging by after dinner and drinks with my brother to let myself in to grab them. As expected, he and his 2 best friends' roommates were out, and what was not expected was when I was in the little office adjoining his bedroom gathering my papers. The apartment door opened and a lot of giggling ensued. I kept quiet, as I assumed one of his friends was getting lucky, and I didn't want to interrupt. Imagine my surprise when the giggling and intoxicated slurring approached the bedroom I usually occupied, followed by the squeaking bed springs, and a symphony of noises usually associated with intimate activities. Any hope I might have had that it was one of his roommates too intoxicated to find his own room was dashed when she started yelling his name. As they were both clearly intoxicated, it didn't take long for them to pass out mid-activity. I managed to unfreeze myself, and after spending several very sad moments looking at the irrefutable proof that this relationship was not worth saving, I slipped out. The front door, I spent all night walking the city, at first feeling ashamed that he had cheated on me, then increasingly more angry that I felt ashamed, then finally angry at him by the time morning arrived. I had decided how best to deal with the situation. I walked back to his building and called him when he picked up clearly, mostly asleep. I told him we needed to talk, and I would be up in 5 minutes, and hung up smiling for the first time. As I imagined his panic 5 minutes later, sitting in his living room, I simply said I felt we weren't working out, that I was not as happy as I suspected I could be, and that while our relationship used to be exciting, it was feeling more like a chore. I wished him the best and was walking out the door before he managed to pick his jaw off the floor on a hunch. I went out the back door and was pleased, if not surprised, to find his half-dressed companion crouching out on the fire escape. What followed was weeks of pleading, denial, and desperation on his part. When I was unyielding, he began to be suspicious did I know about his indiscretion. He, of course, couldn't ask me in case I didn't know, so he started lashing out at all of his friends and co-workers who had been there that night, accusing them of telling me. And in this manner, they all learned of his infidelity. It caused, I later found, some major rifts between him and his friends, as they all liked me, and led to him being let go at work for increasingly erratic behaviour and causing hostility with his co-workers. Now that is what I call a masterclass. In ice-cold revenge, she turned his own paranoia against him and watched his life implode from the sidelines, without lifting a finger. Sometimes, the best revenge is just letting someone destroy themselves, while you walk away with your dignity intact. Absolutely brilliant. Parents have read it. Why are you disappointed in your adult child? I just disowned my stepson last week. He came into my life at 12, a few months short of turning 13. He turned 23 a couple of months ago. It's been 10 years of hell. I missed my children. Divorce sucks, and I didn't see them enough, and really looked forward to him being my son. I knew from the moment he moved in that he was lying to me about virtually everything. No matter how big or small, he would deflect outright lies. He started getting bad grades in school, claiming, I don't want to be a nerd. We worked with him. He'd get straight A's for 6 weeks, then purposefully start failing again. Then he got involved with the less desirable elements older than him as well. He started fighting a lot, became his group's enforcer. At 15, he got locked up in a juvenile detention centre with a boot camp-like program for 6 weeks, model citizen perfect grades. Respectful, the instructors told us that they had no idea why he was even there. Came home 3 days before his 16th birthday. Perfect gentleman on his birthday. He went out with friends and disappeared for days, came back. Had obviously been using something, got in a fight with his mother. Left, came back, kicked in the back door, and stole some electronics. We called the cops and they had him in 30 minutes, on his way to the pawn shop in court. The next day, he was rude and belligerent, did 6 months in real juvenile. This time came home after Christmas, back to school, back to fighting, finally got jumped by 3 guys with brass knuckles that put him in the hospital, finally quit fighting, dropped out of high school. At 17, married a few months later. My wife is an idiot for supporting it, gets her pregnant. They split up a few months in the cycle of him arguing with his mother, being hateful and nasty to her, and leaving weeks or months go by. He comes back over the course of the last 6 years. There have been girlfriends living with us because my wife cannot say no to her little boy. He won't hold a job. Best streak of working is about 2 months. Meanwhile, he's been locked up multiple times for substances, being in a burglary ring, domestic violence, driving without a license, failure to pay child support. Did I mention that there are 2 kids by different mothers? Now the latest is a return of one of the psycho girlfriends that I have explicitly banned from our property. That's crazy. Turns out a few weeks back they informed us that she's pregnant. At the same time, I warned her that the more she lets them hang out while I'm away, the better the chance that something bad happens. It did. He had one of his flare-ups. One evening late, I'm out of town. He's stone cold sober, gets pissed off at nothing really. I reviewed the security footage, proceeds to get into an argument with his mother screaming in the front yard. It moves over by the garage, grabbed her and threw her down on the driveway, landed on the corner of the concrete, on her tailbone, couldn't get up, spent most of the night in the hospital. I drove in from 2 hours away in the middle of the night. She's okay, but it could have been much worse. This is one more in a long string of events that culminated in physical violence. For the first time, I didn't mince Ord's never again disowned. She has agreed somehow. I don't think it will last, and that makes me sad. I have been clear though, from here out, she can pick one of us, him or me. Some people just can't be saved, no matter how much love and second chances you give them. This man spent 10 years trying to be a father to someone who repaid him with violence and chaos. There comes a point where protecting the people you love means cutting out the poison, even when it breaks your heart. What is the deepest, darkest secret you found out about a friend that really messed with your head? When I was around 8 years old, I met a girl named, let's call her Molly. Her family had moved in that summer to a house a few houses down, and I really didn't see her for the first month or 2. That summer, my first memory of her was when I was playing with a small anthill in my backyard, and she came over and joined me. She showed interest in my anthill, and by 8-year-old logic, she was the coolest person ever, and we became best friends. We would play every day that we could in her backyard or my backyard, go to the pool, ride bikes, ride scooters, and play basketball. Basically, if I went outside, she would be out with me. A few years later, we were still best friends and did everything together when we were about 12, 13-ish. I remember it was the late fall of 7th grade when she didn't show up for a month of school. When she came back, she didn't really tell me why she was gone. She said that she was sick and was taking medication to get better, so I never thought too much about it. After that, we would still hang out every day, but I started to notice that she wasn't the same. She wasn't as hyper as she always was, like she would have to take breaks more often when we were doing stuff the summer before. 8th grade and 8th grade, she still seemed pretty normal, but I remember that her mum would call her in to take medication, and she couldn't stay out as long with me anymore. High school started, we went to the same high school, but didn't get to hang out as much because I was playing baseball. And she started to take up playing the piano. She used to play softball, baseball with me, until she said she had to stop playing baseball, so she took up an instrument because of our different schedules. We didn't get to see each other too often, and we would once or twice a week, but it felt like we never talked in the summer. After freshman year, we used to hang out every day, but she couldn't go out as much. She would be inside her house more, and I would go over to her place and watch TV, play video games. And she got really good with the piano, so she would play when my family would go over for barbecues. This summer was also the same summer she was going to the doctors. More often, she would always tell me it was just a checkup, and if she didn't say checkup, she would say she was getting testing done. She would tell me that she was okay, but I knew something wasn't okay. Our family shared a beach house down in South Carolina. that we would go to in August of each summer, about the second week of being there. That's when I found out we would go out to the boardwalk pretty much every morning before it got too hot, and just go to the beach, get ice cream cones every day, and do whatever. This was the first summer that her dad had to come with us everywhere, and it wasn't really a big deal. Neither one of us really minded, but I didn't know why he wanted to come. We were standing in line to get food when I saw her pass out in the middle of ordering food for everyone. I was freaking out while her dad called her mum to meet them back at the house, because Molly passed out, so he picked her up and we ran back to the house, which was about 5 minutes away, and just got in their car and started speeding towards the local hospital. Her parents took her to emergency care, and I waited in the waiting room. I called my parents and told them what happened, and they met me at the hospital. About 6 hours later, I was allowed to see her, and she told me that she was okay and that she must have passed out from the heat and not drinking enough water. She was staying at the hospital overnight, so she and my parents took me out to eat and stopped by the house first to get changed and stuff. Before heading back to the hospital, I had just finished showering and getting changed when her mum stopped by my room and told me that she and my parents had to talk to me. This was the scariest moment of my life. Her parents had told me that Molly was diagnosed with ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, back in the nth grade, and that she wasn't expected to live much longer. Her condition was getting worse, and she might only live for a few more years. I didn't know what ALS was, so they were explaining it to me, and I remember crying for hours. I went back to the hospital with her parents to check up on her and get her food. And then we went to her room, and they told her that they told me what was happening. She was literally a year or two from death, but she didn't cry or feel sorry for herself. She had just passed out and was smiling and joking about saying she wasn't going to have to do her summer projects and homework at least, and was comforting her parents. And she was the most amazing person I have ever met, to be able to be that happy and confident in the face of death. She ended up coming back to school, held at full with me, and she told our small circle of friends what might happen to her in the coming year and how she wanted it to be the best year. It was the most bittersweet moment of my life. All my friends and I quit sports and after school clubs so we could hang out with her every day, and we all just did whatever she wanted, any place she wanted to go, anything she wanted to do. My parents would even let me sleep over at her house whenever we wanted, and I basically ended up living with her for the entire sophomore year of high school. That was the most fun year of my life, and I won't forget it. That summer, her condition worsened, and on August 17th she passed away. She was the prettiest, smartest, funniest, most confident, outgoing, energetic, friendliest and loving person I will ever know. I'm not crying, you're crying. This is what true friendship looks like when you find out your best friend is dying. You don't waste time feeling sorry for yourself. You make every moment count. This girl faced her own mortality with more grace and courage than most adults ever will, and her friends honoured that by giving her the best year of her life. People with traumatic childhoods. What are the effects the trauma had on your adult life? I had it okay, but having an alcoholic dad still trying to forgive, we're working on it for sure. Did a few things to my personality. I'm very quick to get defensive. I can feel it in my chest. Critiques or comments about small innocuous things can put me in survival mode, partly because I think I spent so much time in survival mode, justifying anything I was currently doing, that I have difficulty getting out of it. I hate having to justify myself, but I tend to over-explain everything to get out ahead of the argument. I assume is coming typing that out. Just made me realise I'm very often trying to get out ahead of an argument before one even starts. I remember, when I was in high school, my dad came screaming into my room that I was napping too much and that I was on some substances. Admit it in reality. I had a 6 a.m. weight training class. I felt like I needed to take because then maybe I wouldn't be as much of a target for him. And my only time of relative peace was late at night, after everyone was asleep. So I slept like 5 hours, went to school, then came home and napped for an hour before I had to go to work until midnight. Things that aren't really Attacks feel like attacks because that's how it would always start. Passive-aggressive comment, then full-blown explosion later. If a couple of comments didn't work, I can read the emotional state of a room. I'm always looking and noticing how people are feeling. It is not out of altruism, but out of habit. Had to get good at it. Kept anger and comments away from my brother. I'm almost 100% accurate. I can't read minds, but I notice if so. Mioni's feeling upset or annoyed very early, or if there's some tension I need absolute quiet to sleep. People noises in the middle of the night immediately bring me from 0 to 11. I need to know what the noise is, what is going on, who is where. I don't find any difficulty in cutting people out of my life. And that one is concerning. I feel like a normal response to that would be to at least grieve a bit, but it's just a matter of fact with my thoughts. Okay, they are gone forever now. I don't talk to them moving on, overthinking and over-planning after one argument. Okay, that person is gone now. We had an argument. They hate me forever. So let's plan on how to never see them again. When someone in the room is angry, anxiety goes through the roof. Heart rate goes to the moon. Must fix, can't let the Angie. Get worse, do whatever you can to appease. Now it's going to be very bad if you don't fix their anger. I tend to keep my interests to myself and only share them if I'm certain the other party is also interested in the same things. Everything my dad didn't already like, music, any sport I played that he never did, hobbies he wasn't interested in, was deemed stupid, dumb waste of time. How could you call that music, etc. So I just stopped advertising what I thought was cool. I still tailor playlists, movies, activities, etc. to the people. I will be around, I think, in a subconscious effort to avoid setting anyone off. Difficulty saying no, and people-pleasing, especially in my career, one that I really need to keep working on, is how I've somehow internalized certain insults and tossed them about casually, especially on the internet. I hate how I go from normal disagreement to, you mouth-breathing idiot. You're the dumbest person alive. Quick to anger. I hate being told I'm wrong. Much more than the average person growing up. No matter what evidence or what have you, I was wrong, and sometimes guess what, I am wrong. But when I'm in an argument or a disagreement, it brings me right back to when my dad would be clearly waiting for me to stop talking so he could yell at me until I shrunk back down. And I feel like I have to die on whatever hill I am currently on, or it's all over. I'm never going to get people to listen to me ever again. I'm really trying to work on this, but my knee-jerk reaction is you're not listening to me. I'm right back to being a kid trying to explain how I couldn't have broken the dang there. Nung on the back of the TV, just admit it, dang it, because I was at school all day. One response only to yelling, tense argument, etc. Shut down completely and stop talking while stewing in anger. Trauma rewires your brain in ways that stick with you forever. This person has turned hypervigilance into an art form, constantly scanning for threats that might not even exist. It's exhausting to live like this, but it's also survival mode, burned into your DNA. The fact that they're self-aware about it is the first step to healing, but undoing decades of conditioning is no joke. How did you stupidly make your medical condition worse? It was Valentine's Day, and I was sick, fever chills, fatigue, nausea, and general misery had kept me home for the day. I'm in the medical field myself, and it seemed that the entire region was currently decimated by this year's influenza strain. So no biggie, that weird twinge in my side that started a few days ago was probably a pulled muscle from too many back stretches at the dance studio. Right? I had shrugged it off, but now it legitimately hurt with every step I took. Fine, I'll go to the stupid clinic today, but later first, I need some more sleep. I woke up with barely enough time to fling myself out of bed and towards the hall bath, getting there just in time to vomit more fluids than I thought I'd consumed. Also, I noticed the lack of coughing or congestion that typically arrives with the flu, so there's something else going on. That pain is right over my left kidney, but it's probably nothing. Okay, then I should probably get my sick self to the nearest urgent care clinic, and I definitely shouldn't be driving. I called my husband and explained the current circumstances, asking him to come home and take me to the doctors, because I'm a stubborn paramedic who hates it when people go directly to the hospital's emergency room for ridiculously minor things. I went to an urgent care clinic near my house. I expected to have a physician assistant confirm my self-diagnosis and tell me to tough it out with over-the-counter meds. Because treating a virus like influenza usually means managing the symptoms and trying to decrease the discomfort. The physician assistant took a quick look at me and told me to go to the emergency room, as is my nature. I protested, but she was serious enough that I was actually considering going. I finally agreed to go, just to make my husband more comfortable with the situation, but I fully expected that this was a waste of time and hours of my life. I'd never get back by the time we arrive. I've accepted that I have a kidney infection, but still feel the emergency room is overkill after triage and a preemptive blood draw for labs. I was taken to a room I didn't even have time to change into the stupid drafty hospital gown provided before my nurse arrived, to start an IV to treat my dehydration. Cool, pretty standard stuff. So far, several minutes later, I was talking with a physician about my signs and symptoms when there's a knock at the door and a lab tech entered to hand deliver my test results. Oh, this can't be good. I watch the doctor's eyes widen as she reads the values, and then she announces, yeah, we're going to be keeping you overnight. She then orders a second IV line hardcore painkillers and a massive dose of antibiotics, and leaves me trying to figure out what just happened through a pain and narcotic haze. Well, okay, it is around 8 in the evening at this point, so overnight observation seems reasonable. I expect a patient transport tech to come fetch me and take me upstairs to a general medical ward. Instead, a nurse starts to wheel my bed towards the elevator, which is really weird. Nurses usually have better things to do than move patients between wards at this point. I hadn't been told anything about what was wrong or where I was going, but I start to get somewhat nervous as I'm wheeled into an intensive care unit. I rationalise this by telling myself that they must be out of general medical beds, and so I'm being put into this room as overflow. It's a huge room, and my nurse appears to have only one patient. Me. Man, this keeps getting weirder within minutes. I'm hooked up to every type of monitor I've ever attached to a patient, and then some plus I've got a transmitting cardiac monitor stuck to me too. My nurse goes through the endless list of health history, lifestyle and medication questions, and asks my husband to bring my birth control pills from home. What the hell, I have a kidney infection. And this is ridiculous. Is that really necessary? I mean, I'll be home tomorrow. She looks at me with both amusement and pity, and then continues bustling about the room, doing important nursing tasks. Yeah, I was wrong, it wasn't the flu. She shattered my last layer of denial by showing me my lab results, and holy hell, my white count is 28.77. I'm dying. A normal white blood cell value is between 3 and 10. And I was so far past that I was in critical condition. Turns out I was in septic shock in addition to renal failure and septicemia, and had I waited a few more hours to seek medical help, I'd have probably been toast. I couldn't deny the seriousness of the situation anymore, but I just felt too sick to even care after a sleepless night in an endless parade of nurses, technicians, X-ray imaging techs, and a priest. I finally met my attending physician and a whole crew of residents. I'm exhausted, grumpy, and in pain, but apparently I still need to be lectured on how dangerously close to death I've gotten by waiting to seek help, despite the fact that I had practically zero reason to suspect anything serious anyway. Afterwards, we have a nice round table discussion of my treatment plan, how the antibiotics are working, and about how I'm probably going to be just fine in a couple days wrong. Again, turns out the massive infusion of fluids and treatments to kickstart my kidneys caused my lungs to fill with fluid, resulting in a condition where, well, you can't breathe. The little sacs in your lungs that do the oxygen exchange were effectively flooded, meaning that no matter how much air you're gulping in, you simply can't extract the amount of oxygen needed to live without medical intervention. I really didn't want to end up intubated with a ventilator breathing for me and my awesome attending. Let me try the less dramatic option of staying awake to remember to breathe. It sucked seriously, the worst, most miserable experience I've been through. But it worked, and on the morning of day 5 in the hospital, I got transferred to a general medical ward. It was blessedly quiet, at least until I dozed off, and my oxygen levels would drop again, and then the monitor would shriek me awake. I was slowly weaned off of supplemental oxygen over the next few days, and eventually got to go home on the condition that I'd sleep with a little extra oxygen at night. The scariest thing about the whole experience was how it snuck up on me. So stealthily, our working theory is that I must have had a completely asymptomatic urinary tract infection that progressed to my kidneys, but we'll probably never know for sure. I mean, UTIs aren't generally subtle, and if I'd even suspected that I had one, I'd have gone to urgent care for testing, and an antibiotic. I knew what to look for. And it still nearly ended me. I'm fine now, feeling much better. I'm definitely still tired and lack stamina, but I'd say I'm at about 85%, and it shouldn't be too long until I'm as completely healthy as I'm likely to get. I may have lost some kidney function, so I'll continue to go in for routine blood tests, but we're very optimistic about how the most recent scans looked. Medical professionals really do make the worst patients. This paramedic almost died because she kept downplaying her symptoms and convincing herself it was just the flu. Sometimes knowing too much can be dangerous because you talk yourself out of taking things seriously when your body is literally screaming for help. Trust your instincts, even when your brain says otherwise. Thanks for sticking around through these wild stories from the depths of the internet. If you're still here and enjoyed, consider hitting that subscribe button for more content like this.